Hey guys, it's Em, and today I'm going to be covering Juza Gaiden. I was recommended to cover this book multiple times by a certain person with a dog icon on Discord, and in some free time I had, I cracked and I read the whole thing. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I do feel I have a bit to say about this book, but luckily it's not to the same extent as the two other horrible Gaidens that shall not be named here. But let's get into our review and recap of Juza Gaiden. So our story starts off with some rebels fighting against Keno's army. Things aren't going well, so one of their members runs off to find Juza. He manages to track him down, and So after Juza cools down a bit, Jan, the member who was sent to get Juza, manages to convince Juza to come help fight off Keno's army. Everybody pauses as Juza makes his very casual entrance onto the battlefield, but as they're talking, the commander of Keno's forces arrives. Someone said to rival the Man of Seven Scars, which almost immediately makes Juza want to fight him. As expected, Juza makes quick work of this commander and says he isn't in the same league as Ken before killing him along with all of his men with little effort. Then Juza gets swarmed by women and the rebels celebrate. Where did the women come from? I have no idea, with his biggest fanboy Jan showing his admiration for his hero Juza. I believe that the start of this Gaiden is a little slow, and a bit lacking as we'll get to in a bit. One thing is, Juza's acting exactly the way you'd expect him to act. Even as early as now in the 100 or so words I've told you so far, everything Juza's doing fits his character. This is already better than a certain book called Ray Gaiden where things just happen and there wasn't anything special the MC himself was adding to the story. This is a trend that you'll see throughout this story and I really appreciate it, but let's continue. Night falls and as the rebels are planning a raid, they get info that the Man of Seven Scars has toppled Cassandra. They're hesitant to call Juza about this, seeming to know that Juza will immediately go after Ken if he finds out, so they try to keep it a secret till after their raid's over. Jan hears about this and sneaks out to tell Juza. And after a brief talk about freedom and how Juza's one with the clouds, Jan tells him about Cassandra, which leads to Juza heading after Ken and unable to help the rebels with their raid. When the day comes, they all seem scared until Jan spills the beans that he told Juza and that they had no right to deprive him of his freedom. They take this about as well as you'd expect, but as they're stomping Jan out, they remember that they still have to deal with Keno's forces. People begin bowing out left and right before Jan decides to go off on his own to deal with them. His courage seems to inspire all the remainders to go with him, but when they arrive, they find out Juza apparently dealt with all of the army by himself before leaving. Jan gives a little inspired speech, and then he doesn't show up for the rest of the book. No, I'm not kidding. None of these characters will ever show up again. This is one of the weakest aspects of this book. The original story sections are carried by Juza, as the rest of the characters are pretty much useless plywood. They lack any characters, they don't really have much time to be expanded upon other than one character point, and they don't really get anything afterwards. This doesn't ruin the book, but it's very noticeable for these first two little arcs. Anyways, we cut to Juza thinking about hunting down Ken as he couldn't protect Juza's beloved, before we cut to him waking up with some woman and them just casually talking. Which turns into Juza spilling the tea on Kenshiro before he casually ends up heading out to Cassandra. Then he immediately gets attacked by a bear and falls off of the cliff. No, I didn't skip anything. This just happens. We then cut to a flashback of child Yuria telling Juza that she'd love to have a ring before Juza finds a nest full of jewels and grabs a ring to take to Yuria. The same ring we can assume he was catching as he fell. It then cuts to him upset about his father not telling him and Yuria were half-siblings, before we then cut back to the present where Juza's regained consciousness but is blinded, and the bear, or some other bear, is at the bottom of the ravine with him. After a bit of running, Juza seems to snap and turns to face the bear, but as he looks he sees the bear has 7 scars and this sends Juza into a fit of rage. He then brutalizes the bear before simply noticing it was protecting this area its significant other died at. And after apologizing and passing out, Juza wakes up in a bed next to a woman that says she'll address his wounds and give him a tour around the village she's in. As she's showing him around, she mentions that he must think of all of them as caged birds, and as they're talking, they walk past a group of villagers being rowdy and planning to sell off one of their own. As a quick note, this is Jan, or Yan, and this is Alyssa. Jot these down because these will become very important later, or at least one of them will. So as you can assume, Juza doesn't really like this too much, so he intervenes, which prompts Keno's forces to intervene, which prompts Juza to have another flashback of him talking to Rao with a very long chin, I may add, about Rao's ambition. Rao takes advantage of this point and asks Juza why he doesn't just take Yuria for himself, which seems to aggravate Juza into dropping a zinger of a line. Rao gets angry and prepares to fight Juza, but before Rao can do anything, Juza disappears. They both talk about their admiration for each other before we cut back to the present with Juza killing Keno's forces. He yells for Jan to escape, and as he is, the woman from earlier offers to help. Surprise, she's evil! And dude, even worse! But anyways, Yona here ends up telling Juza that they have a plan to destroy the hope of the village by having Juza get killed in an arena they have under the city. He then makes Jan stab Juza and Juza passes out. You might wonder why I said makes in quote-unquotes. Well, that's because there's not really anything here to stop him from not stabbing Juza. He could have literally just ran into the forest from here and Juza most definitely would have backed this play. None of Kano's forces have guns or anything to stop him from doing this, but instead of doing this very obvious tactic, or Juza saying anything, he wants to be cool, so he tells the kid to stab him. A little stupid, but let's keep going. This cuts to Souther and Juza having a convo. That doesn't matter so much, I'm just gonna skip it. And then we cut to Juza tied up on the floor, with Yona giving another hope speech before we then look at Jan and girl, I forgot the name of, fighting. For some reason, Jan's just turned into a murder monster Rima and is actually just trying to straight kill her. This character shift is so abrupt, I really thought he was a double agent or they secretly drugged him for something, but no. For some reason, all of his humanity just went out the window and he's on kill mode. We then cut to Yona's backstory where basically his father sold him as a slave, and when they finally met in this arena, his dad killed himself. Yona joined Rao's army and he hears about Juza and he wants to meet him as he believes he can change something. I don't know how in Rao's army Yona wouldn't have heard more about Kenshiro instead of Juza, since as we've seen, Juza really hasn't been doing too much other than smashing girls and occasionally helping rebels, but let's continue. Jan corners girl as Juza's distracted fighting and slashes her, but then finally comes to his senses and stabs himself just as Juza makes it to them. Juza then exchanges some words with this idiot and then he dies, with Juza alpha mailing past Yona and preparing to bury Jan. You may be wondering why I'm calling Jan stupid. Well, if he didn't immediately turn into a Terminator the second he stepped in this arena, no one would have gotten hurt. If he stopped for even a little bit at the start and cried or showed any human emotion, Juza would have reached them in time. If this was some random person or one of Keno's forces, maybe I'd accept him going knife crazy, but him going gamer mode against the only character we can assume he has ties with just doesn't make any sense to me. But the little plot device served its purpose, I guess. After finishing burying Jan, Yona appears and the girl tries to stab him. Juza blocks the stab with his hands, and then we cut to a flashback of Jagi bullying Yuria and Juza beating the dog shit out of him before Yuria stopped him. As Yuria's about to explain why she stopped him, Jagi pulls out a knife and prepares to stab Juza? I don't know, guys, I think this escalated a little bit. Juza stops the stab and prepares to presumably kill Jagi, but then Yuria takes the slash to her hand to protect him. That being said, Jagi should have got his ass beat for this. Because of the present where Juza breaks the knife and punches Yona to the ground. Yona asks Juza to kill him and Juza says no and walks away. The girl then appears and Yona asks her the same thing. Dudes do anything but go to therapy, honestly. But the girl says she won't let him die until she can forgive him. Did you enjoy that story? I hope you did, because it's being packed up and sent to the middle of nowhere, just like the first part, because it literally didn't matter, because we're never going to talk about this ever again. To be fair, I think it gets better past this point, but neither of these parts do anything but just let Juza be cool. I wouldn't blame anybody for dropping this book before seeing the better parts, because these first two mini arcs are not really that great. As I said earlier, Juza's heavy carrying the story so far. You got two interesting flashbacks, and you know Juza doesn't really like Ken, and that's about it so far. It's cute, but if the rest of the book was like this, I'd give it a 4. Luckily, it's not, but this opener is really bland. I'd be surprised if a lot of people made it past this point if they weren't already a Juza fan. The background of the story, we cut to Juza kicking down the door as he hears a kid screaming for help. She wants help since her brother apparently hasn't said a word since yesterday, but when surrounded by Juza's Chad energy, she manages to squeak out a sis, and Juza smiles knowing he's about to kill both of these kids. Just kidding, that doesn't happen, but like, seriously, why is he smirking like this? After helping them, Juza walks outside to find Huey and Kakyoin. They apparently arrived to make Juza come back to the Nanto General's tower, but he gives the same reasoning he gave in Juza Gaiden, which is basically he doesn't care what happens to Nanto and Hokuto, and he doesn't want to serve a general he doesn't even know the face of. Huey and Sharon can't accept this answer, so the two of them team up to unleash a blast to knock out Juza. I can't wait to see This is just a fucking joke at this point. So Juza kicks his legs in a circle so fast the blast disappears and they all smirk about it, noting how far they've all come since the last time they saw each other. We then cut to the baby chariots. Oh, look at them, Subfudo. Look at them eating their little sandwiches. But after a bit, Juza states he wants to live free and attempts to run away. He doesn't get too far and he ends up eating something he shouldn't have and he passes out. He comes back to in the training grounds with Yuria watching over him. This is the first time they meet, as a quick note. Yuria tries to get Juza to eat, but he refuses. Yuria then says she won't eat either. Apparently these two little beans don't eat for an entire 5 days until Yuria passes out and Juza gets worried. She says she still won't eat until Juza eats, so he finally gives in and they both eat and laugh together. It's little scenes like this that made me love this book. We didn't get to know too much about why Juza liked Yuria in the base story, but these little scenes help you understand his actions more and more. From just this scene alone, you can see why Juza would love Yuria. And we get more of these to help cement, with each seeming to get better and better at selling this point. It's a main highlight of this book by a long shot. I love all of these scenes. We cut to the present where he tells the both of them the only person he'd give his life to is Yuria, and then he prepares to leave. The two of them watch as Juza is leaving, but then as he is, a body magically appears in front of them. I have no idea where this body came from. And it's evident that Ryuga caused these scars. Or big scar. Juza's surprised, but Shuren tells him Ryuga changed after Juza left. We then cut to Juza after finding out Yuria is his half-sister, tearing up Nanto statues before eventually being detained, stating that if he can't have Yuria, he doesn't care about anything else. As he's sulking, Ryuga appears to bust him out. He basically says the clouds deserve to be free and he covers Juza as he makes his escape. We then cut back to the present where Ryuga arrives and begins killing Huey and Shuren's troops. The two try to intervene and Ryuga immediately, no joke, in one panel beats the both of them. Ryuga turns his attention towards Juza and they begin fighting. After some nice panels, the two come to a draw and then talk for a while before Ryuga heads off. Juza ends up doing the same thing and we cut to him wandering into a village where he's attacked by a female-esque figure fighting with yo-yos. I wonder who it could possibly be. So after he dodges some yo-yos and catches a charge, Mamiya manages to pin Juza to the ground. As she's telling him she doesn't tolerate bandits, Arya runs up and Juza accidentally knocks Mamiya off of him. So the two talk. Juza asks where Rei is and they both tell him that Rei passed away defending Mamiya. After leaving a flower at Rei's grave, he asks where Ken went, with Mamiya saying that he left to go save the world. Juza starts to roast Ken, but Mamiya immediately slaps him, which leads to her running away, and Arya says that Mamiya's been through a lot, so she might have taken that sentiment personally. We then get a flashback to Juza and Rei having a friendly sparring match. After they come to a draw, Rei talks about how after he masters his technique, he'll figure out what else to do with his life, while Juza seems unsure of what he wants to do. We then cut back to the present where Juza seems like he still doesn't know what he wants. Around this point, we end up going back into the main story's continuity, as we see Rihaku's men trying to ask Juza to join them. We then cut to another flashback. I know it's Whiplash since we just got one, but stay with me. Where Ken's walking around and Juza seems aggravated that he doesn't care about Yuria, as he apparently fell out of a tree and has a fever right now. Yuria arrives telling Juza to stop, and it's revealed that Ken was protecting some baby birds for Yuria all night. She then asks if Ken's okay, and Juza notes that he's never seen her so concerned before. We then cut back to the present where Juza laments his failures and is getting aggravated that the guards keep trying to make him go back. This leads into the scene where he's captured and Yuria comes to tell him that she's the Nanto general. As she's asking him to give his life for her with tears in her eyes, we get a quick little scene of when they first met in a previous flashback before we get to see them hug. I like this scene more than the original stories because before it just felt like, Yuri's here, I guess I'll just die. But it really feels like this has more emotion to it. Not even just due to the flashback or the build up to this scene, but this entire scene by itself just packs a lot more punch for me. Yuria seems more affected than she did in the original story because if I remember right, she cried for like 2 seconds with one little tear coming out of her eye and the story kept going. Here she seems genuinely upset she has to ask her friend to die for her. It's just a nice touch. Rihaku and Juza have small talk about Juza's fate and him basically having to give up his life so the person he loves can be with Ken. And we actually get to see Rihaku have some humanity and cry as he really doesn't want Juza to die. This is more than the original story did for him, as Rihaku only really seemed to care about Yuria. It's a small but charming scene. As I'm sure we all know by now, after this we get the Rao v Juza fight. There's some nice roasting here Juza gets in this scene, but things end up going the same. As Juza's on the ground, we get one last flashback, which is my favorite flashback of this entire book. Juza prepares to run away again and Yuria finds him. They have a quick conversation about why he's leaving, with Juza basically saying he's a cloud, and clouds serve no other purpose than drifting aimlessly through the air. To which Yuria responds by saying that the clouds give shade when it's hot and rains and droughts, and they give people a feeling that they can go anywhere they want. She ends with saying that he might not think it, but he helps people just by being there and everyone knows he's important. This entire scene hit me. I can't fully explain why, but this scene just really did it for me and sold why Juza really loved Yuria. Across this entire book, it felt like Yuria was really the only one there for him and that he really bonded with, and this final speech just cemented it for me. After this scene, as you can imagine, the conclusion of the Juza and Rao fight happens, with Juza passing on and Rao expressing his respect for his opponent. The last few panels are everyone feeling that Juza's passed away and Yuria crying over his death, with our final panel being Yuria and Juza as teenagers running around in a grassy field having fun. The end. Now, let's wrap this up. What do I think about this Gaiden? Well, it has strengths and weaknesses, both being very prominent. For its strengths, it's mainly its character-defining traits it gives to Juza. Giving more of an explanation and showing scenes of him and Yuria together really strengthened their relationship, which in the base story, we really didn't get anything other than Juza's words. Juza's apparent hatred of Ken is a real nice touch. It's something that wasn't really implied in the base canon, but it would make sense for him to hate the guy that Yuria ended up with. Even the jabs he makes at Ken as he says he let her die are very believable. I do like the fact that they made him interact with other characters we never got to see him interact with, like Ryuga Souther and some early Rao reactions. It made him feel a bit more connected to the story. My only real complaint is, honestly, I wish we got to see him interact more with Ken. This isn't a problem with the book itself, I just think it would have been a real interesting dynamic if these two teamed up or if Juza attacked Ken, and I feel like it was a real missed opportunity as they do briefly touch on it. The entire end half of this book, past their Yuga section along with the young Juza and Yuria flashbacks, were peak Gaiden writing. My belief is if you're writing a prequel type story for one of these characters, you have to let me walk away with more knowledge for these characters and why they acted a certain way. I also want to know how they would have reacted to other canon characters or their thoughts on them. Make me really understand who the author was writing about, and for the end half of this book, it accomplishes that. I walked away with way more Juza knowledge than I started with. Way better than some other stupid Gaiden about Rei where his character hardly changes, although the book is 8 times the size of this one. As for the weaker aspects of Juza Gaiden though, the entire first 2 non-canon sections where Juza's just dealing with the rebels in Jan, you really don't care about those characters at all and they don't give you a reason to. Juza was the only well-written character in those scenes, so everything else was just kinda boring. I'm not gonna lie to you, I debated dropping this book after the Yona section because I was just so bored of it. It just felt like generic anime film. As I said earlier, I wouldn't blame you for putting down this book at that point because of how bland it is. It's not bad, there's no angry trigger like Garuda magically finding a map that leads to the Nanto General's tower. It's just nothing of substance at all. I kinda wish the writer focused more on the dynamic of Juza disliking Ken and having him interact with some more of the canon characters. Or maybe just having one of them change his mind about Ken, because honestly, that's what I thought the Mamaya and Ari scene was going to be, but it was straight glossed over because Ari goes, yeah, Rei died, and then we get flashback out of the town immediately. Heavily missed opportunity. Now, where would I rank it? In comparison to all of the other Gaidens I've read, maybe a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10? Understand me, when I say something's a 5, I mean it's average. Nothing really wrong with it or that it's bad, just it's not gonna leave a lasting impression on me. As I said earlier, this Gaiden definitely has moments where it shines, and is probably some of my favorite character-driven interactions in the series. But then you have the other half where it's Jan, Yona, and Girl. If the entire first half of the book wasn't this way and was written with more interactions I would have cared about, I could probably see this being a 10 out of 10 honestly. But that's not the world we live in. And I don't feel comfortable giving this over a 6 or 7 since I legit almost put the book down at the start, so I feel a 6.5 is fine for this. I'd recommend Juza fans give it a look as I doubt the slow start would bother them as much, but for a normal HNK fan that feels no affinity towards this character, if you can slog through the start, I promise it's a worthy read. I guess that's really all I had to say. As always, I'm glad to discuss with any of you guys in the comments, and I've been M, and I am out.